Hello, everyone. My name is Layne Haber. I'm one of the co-founders of Connext, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about the Interoperability Trilemma. So we've got another one. So first, I just want to say that Ethereum L2s need trust-minimized interoperability. That shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone here. We've seen a bunch of different domains pop up with Arbitrum and Optimism, ZK Syncs on the horizon, and all of these domains need a way to trustlessly pass messages and data between each other. As an aside, there's a bit of a misconception that Ethereum scalability research and Ethereum interoperability research are two different things, but we've actually known for a really long time that we can scale Ethereum by moving to multiple different domains. So the question has always been, how can we make sure that these domains can pass data between each other trustlessly or in a trust-minimized way? So it turns out that building trust-minimized interoperability protocols is actually kind of hard. A new paper came out called Communications Across Distributed Ledgers that actually showed that you have to introduce one of two assumptions when you're building an interop protocol. Either you have to introduce a trusted third party, which is less than ideal, or you have to introduce a synchrony assumption behind asynchronous operations. So what does that actually mean? It means that you need an action to take place in a specific amount of time, otherwise it won't happen. So that looks a lot like expiries on hash locks. So despite it being kind of hard, we see new interop protocols, new bridges every day, and there's a ton of money going into this space, and every single bridge protocol markets itself in the same way, and they're all trustless, secure, and decentralized. That may not be true, but it makes it really difficult for developers to be able to navigate that trade-off and understand which bridges are right for their projects. So how's that going for us? Pretty poorly. We actually have a bunch of new cross-chain exploits. There was one on Thorchain. The Poly Network one was pretty bad right up until Compound happened. And then there's, of course, this one, which I'm not sure if you guys can read this, but basically it's just a bridge operator saying that exclusively one person has access to all of the funds that are locked in the bridge. So we've got a lot to learn in terms of actually building protocols that live up to the marketing language that is used. So what does it mean then to be trustless, to be secure, to be decentralized? Decentralized obviously means you have a diverse set of participants who are stakeholders in the system and they're interested in making sure it performs correctly. When we say secure, we mean crypto-economically secure, so the cost of misbehaving far outweighs any of the benefits that you would get from acting maliciously. But when we say trustless, we're really looking to answer one question, and that question is who's verifying the system and how much does it cost to corrupt them? And you have to keep in mind that when we're building these protocols and in this industry, we're hoping to build things that will last for a really long time and have impact at a global scale. So you have to really think boldly with your threat models. If your threat models are just your competitors in the space, that's not good enough. You have to think like, oh, what if Jeff Bezos decided, because why not, to focus the entirety of his resources at just taking down my protocol? And those are the types of actors that you have to consider when you're designing these things. So how does that play into bridges? Well, imagine a scenario where you are a security-conscious Ethereum user. Trustless, trust-minimized security, that means a lot to you, and so you've done a really good job at waiting to move all your funds from mainnet to rollups because BSC was exciting, there was a lot going on Polygon, but really you wanted the full Ethereum verifier set to be securing your funds. Now, you finally got your funds on Arbitrum, but Optimism is also in play. So say you want to move some things over to Optimism, there's some good yields, who knows, you're not boring, you're going to do something exciting. So you decide to use a cheap, fast bridge. That's cool, except it's actually kind of not, because now you've given the entire security of your funds over to this third-party bridge verifier set, which is much, much smaller and likely completely different than the Ethereum verifier set. So now, instead of the security just being the sum of all the parts, it's the weakest link in the system, and your funds are only secured by this small subset of bridge verifiers, which is not what we want. So now that we know a little bit about the importance of bridges and like what it means to truly be secure and trust minimized, let's go through a few different types of bridges that exist. The first is natively verified bridges. An example is the Near Rainbow Bridge, and how these bridges work is they have a light client that's running in the VM of another bridge. So they don't have any additional verifier sets. It's the most trust minimized you can get, because each chain's verifier set is validating the other chains, and you're not adding any additional trust assumptions that you wouldn't be comfortable with by already moving between the chains. The downside, though, is that it's really difficult to build these systems in a way where you can port them over to different domains. So in an ecosystem like Ethereum's, where we have just a bunch of different consensus mechanisms, a bunch of different things to be aware of, each of these bridges would have to be built individually and tailored to the underlying domains. So that's a bit tricky. On the other end of the spectrum, you have externally verified bridges. So these are things like the Matic POS bridge. These bridges have a third set of verifiers that are in charge of all of the funds locked in the bridge. The great thing about them is that you can do arbitrary message passing really easily, and that they're really easily portable to a bunch of different domains without doing a ton of extra work. The downside, and it's a bit of a zinger, is that now you've introduced a major trust assumption. So imagine you have about $10 billion locked in a bridge. Say it's a mint and burn bridge. And these assets, the custodians, the verifiers are supposed to be holding on to them and watching for them until you exit back from your destination chain. But if the stake that these verifiers are putting up is only $2 billion, then it's perfectly rational for them to steal the entire $10 billion worth of funds that are locked in the bridge. So you've taken a bit of a hit on the trust assumptions. A third option is a locally verified bridge, and these bridges take difficult n-party consensus and reduce it down to just 2 parties. So a good example of this are just straight up atomic locks, where now these counterparties will verify each other, and they're both economically incentivized to do so, because should one person gain funds by being malicious, the other person loses it. So they can't necessarily collude to steal all funds from the bridge. So when we take all of these together, just as a recap, you have native cross-chain validation that is by far the most trust minimized. You can do generalized message passing, but unfortunately, you cannot easily extend it to multiple domains. You've got externally verified bridges that are easily extensible to a lot of domains. You can do generalized message passing, but they are not trust minimized. And you have locally verified bridges, which are trust minimized, are extensible, but are really difficult to do generalized message passing in. And that usually comes down to permissions. So take the example of wanting to call Uniswap on some destination chain. That's actually pretty easy to do, because anybody who has swappable tokens can call a Uniswap swap function. But if you're to look at something a bit more complex, like locking and minting NFTs, you can't really do that in a locally verified system. And that's because the caller of the mint function really should be the lock function or the lock contract on the origin chain. And that's really difficult to represent in these locally verified systems. So that's all really cool, but none of this has helped answer the question, how do I choose which bridge is right for my project? And to do that and to navigate the trade-offs, we have come up with this mental model of the interoperability trilemma. So similar to the blockchain scalability trilemma, which states that you can have a blockchain that's either scalable, decentralized, or secure, but two of the three properties, but you definitely can't have all three. We have an interoperability trilemma, which means you can have a bridge that's trust minimized, extensible, so easily portable to different domains, or generalizable, meaning you can pass arbitrary data through it, but you can only have two of these three properties. You cannot have all three. And you can see that the multi-party computation, or MPC bridges, have chosen the extensible and generalizable trade-off. Light client relays have chosen the trust minimized and generalizable trade-off, but they're not easily extensible. And systems that are like atomic locks choose the extensible and trust minimized trade-off. So where does Connext fit into all of this, and kind of how we think of navigating this? We do a locally verified system, so our system is extensible and trust minimized, but it's definitely not generalizable. So a quick primer on how this works. Sorry, this is a bit busy, but I swear it's not that complicated. You have a user on a sending chain and a router on a destination chain. First, the user starts an auction, and that's really just to select a counterparty that they're going to verify with, and all of the routers who are interested and able respond to that auction. User chooses the winning bid. From there, the user locks up funds on the sending chain, router locks up funds on the origin chain, or destination chain, excuse me. And then the user is able to unlock the funds on the destination chain, and the router can use the same condition to unlock the funds on the origin chain. So everybody's made whole. The only real conditions around what you can use as an unlocking condition is that it has to be the same between both chains. So how does this fit into the interoperability trilemma? Well, when we designed this protocol, we really wanted to use a similar approach as Ethereum did with their navigation of the scalability trilemma. So when Ethereum was trying to solve this problem, they chose to not make it scalable and instead focus on a decentralization and a secure as their two main features. This is because these features are the most important to having to longevity in blockchains. Similarly, we think that extensibility and trust minimization are the key backbones to having a long-lived interoperability protocol, and we believe that other more generalizable features can be built on top. So we kind of see NXTP, which stands for Non-Custodial Cross-Chain Transfer Protocol. So NXTP may be a bit of a mouthful, but you should hear it when it's not abbreviated. And that's kind of, we see it as the base layer in this interoperability network and protocol stack. So yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you guys all learned something about bridges, and yeah, find us on Twitter.
Maybe you can take one question.
Sure.
Yeah. Is there any question in the audience? No. Okay.
By the way, if you guys haven't read about the Poly Network hack, it's a great story.
Can you explain more about the locally verified part, like how it's happening with currently like the EVM compatible chains?
Yeah, sure. So if we go back to looking at how NXTP is designed, the first step in that process is I need to find a counterparty. And what that's really doing is it's reducing the consensus of both chains to just an agreement between two parties. This is kind of similar to what channels did, where they would reduce the entire chain consensus to just an agreement between two counterparties. And from there, as long as you can verify that your counterparty has taken the appropriate actions, so in our case, they've locked up funds and the right amount, then you know that you can unlock, and vice versa.
So does the node have to have like a custom implementation, or can a normal normal node runner just verify that?
Yeah, so if all the chains or domains are EVM compatible, you don't have to have a custom function or implementation. But when you move to other L1s that may have a different consensus mechanism, like say we wanted to connect Ethereum and Bitcoin, you would need a slightly different representation of the same concepts that works on the Bitcoin blockchain. So an example would be, okay, we use NXTP and the unlocking condition is just a hash lock, and then you can plug that into like the Lightning network that unlocks an analogous payment on the Bitcoin network with just that same hash lock.
Okay, thank you very much. You deserve a little bit of some applause.